The world is a different place when the sun goes down. Shadows grow longer, sounds become muffled, and sometimes, in the dead of night, the impossible bleeds into our reality. These are two true stories of terror that happened in the dark. They are stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary and unexplained events. Read on if you dare, but be warned. You may never look at the night the same way again. Sarah had been driving for hours. The road stretched out endlessly before her, a ribbon of asphalt cutting through the night. The trees on either side seemed to close in, their branches forming a dark tunnel. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard. Midnight, the witching hour. She had always loved night drives, the solitude, the peace, but tonight felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched. She shook off the feeling and focused on the road. The hum of the engine was her only companion. Suddenly, her headlights caught a figure on the side of the road. A hitchhiker out here in the middle of nowhere? Sarah slowed down, her curiosity piqued. As she drew closer, she could see it was a man, his face hidden by the shadow of his hood. He raised his hand, thumb out, a silent plea for a ride. Sarah hesitated. Something about him made her uneasy. But she couldn't just leave him there, could she? She pulled over, her heart beating faster. She rolled down the window slightly, just enough to speak. "Need a ride?" she asked, her voice trembling. The man nodded, his hood still obscuring his face. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the engine's rumble. He climbed into the passenger seat and Sarah pulled back onto the road, the sense of unease growing stronger with each passing mile. As Sarah drove through the seemingly endless night, the silence inside the car was almost deafening. She glanced at the hitchhiker beside her, his face still obscured by the hood. He hadn't said a word since he got in, and the air was thick with tension. Suddenly, Sarah heard a faint whisper, so soft she thought she might be imagining it. She glanced at the man, but he remained still, staring straight ahead. The whisper grew louder, more insistent. It seemed to be coming from the back seat. Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She dared to glance in the rearview mirror, but there was nothing there, just darkness. Her heart pounded in her chest as the whispers continued, a chorus of unintelligible words. She felt a chill run down her spine, as if icy fingers were tracing along her skin. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had to focus on the road, but the whispers were relentless, filling the car with their eerie presence. She glanced at the hitchhiker again, but he remained silent, his face hidden in the shadows of his hood. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The whispers seemed to be trying to tell her something, but she couldn't understand. All she knew was that she had to keep driving, keep moving forward, no matter what. Suddenly, a figure appeared in her headlights. A man, tall and gaunt, was standing on the side of the road, waving his arms. He was dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. Sarah slowed the car, her mind racing. It was late, and this stretch of road was known to be dangerous, but something about the man's desperation made her pull over. She rolled down the window just a crack and called out to him. "Need a lift?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Sarah had been driving for hours, the darkness of the night pressing in on her from all sides. She was exhausted, her eyes heavy with fatigue, and the last thing she expected was to see a lone figure standing by the side of the road, his thumb outstretched in a classic hitchhiker's gesture. The man didn't answer, but he immediately opened the backseat door and slid inside. His movements were smooth, almost too smooth, as if he had done this countless times before. The door closed with a soft click, and Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Sarah tried to get a good look at him in the rearview mirror, but his face remained hidden in the shadows. The dim light from the dashboard cast eerie shadows across his features, making it impossible to discern any details. She could only see the outline of his figure, a dark silhouette that seemed to blend into the night. A wave of cold air seemed to wash over her as he closed the door. It was as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her, trying to ward off the sudden chill. She glanced at the man again, hoping for some sign of warmth or friendliness, but he remained silent and still. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her instincts screamed at her to drive away, to leave this stranger on the side of the road, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. There was something about him, something that compelled her to stay. He hadn't spoken a word, and his silence was more unsettling than any threat. The car's engine hummed softly, the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who was this man? Why was he out here alone in the middle of the night? And why did he choose her car to get into? She wanted to ask him to break the silence, but her throat felt tight, and the words wouldn't come. The road stretched out before them, dark and empty, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was driving into something unknown and dangerous. "Where are you headed?" Sarah asked, trying to sound casual. The man didn't reply. He just sat there, unmoving, his presence filling the car with an unnatural stillness. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning white. She decided to drive to the next town. There was a gas station there, a beacon of light and civilization in the vast darkness. Maybe she could call for help, or at least find some solace in the presence of others. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, miles away from Sarah's terrifying encounter, another nightmare was unfolding. The forest, shrouded in darkness and mystery, seemed to breathe with an eerie life of its own. The moonlight barely pierced through the dense canopy, casting ghostly shadows on the forest floor. The air was thick with fog, adding to the sense of foreboding that hung over the woods. A group of friends, Emily, Ben, and Chris, were camping for the weekend, seeking a break from the city's noise and lights. They had been planning this trip for months, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of their daily lives. The forest promised tranquility, a chance to reconnect with nature and each other. They arrived in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows as it dipped below the horizon. They had pitched their tents near a small clearing, the sounds of their laughter and conversation echoing through the trees. The clearing was perfect, surrounded by tall, ancient trees that seemed to watch over them. As they set up their campsite, they joked and reminisced about old times, their voices mingling with the sounds of the forest. The smell of pine and earth filled the air, grounding them in the present moment. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled above, they felt a sense of peace wash over them. The night sky was a canvas of stars, each one twinkling like a distant beacon. The campfire's warm glow provided a comforting contrast to the cool night air. They roasted marshmallows, shared stories, and enjoyed the simple pleasure of each other's company. It was a perfect night, or so they thought. But the night was young, and the woods held secrets they couldn't have imagined. As the hours passed, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The forest, once a place of refuge, now seemed to close in around them. Strange noises echoed through the trees, and shadows danced just beyond the firelight. The friends exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier laughter now replaced with a tense silence. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking in the darkness, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Section 8. Strange noises. The night was thick with an unsettling quiet, the kind that makes you feel like you're being watched. The forest, usually alive with the sounds of nocturnal creatures, was eerily silent. The only light came from the dim glow of the campfire, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. As the fire died down and the friends settled into their tents, a strange feeling settled over the campsite. The warmth of the fire was replaced by a cold, creeping sensation that seemed to seep into their bones. They tried to shake it off, attributing it to the chill of the night, but deep down they knew something was off. The air grew still and heavy, and the sounds of the forest seemed to fade away, replaced by an unsettling silence. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The fog rolled in, thick and impenetrable, cloaking the trees in a ghostly shroud. The friends huddled closer together, their whispers barely audible over the oppressive silence. Then, from the depths of the woods came a sound. It started as a faint rustling, like leaves being disturbed by a gentle breeze. But there was no breeze. The sound grew louder, more insistent until it was impossible to ignore. It was coming closer, moving through the trees with a purpose. It was a low growl, guttural and primal, unlike anything they had ever heard before. It reverberated through the forest, sending a wave of fear through the campsite. The growl was followed by a series of strange, unidentifiable noises, like the forest itself was coming alive. The friends exchanged terrified glances, their minds racing with possibilities. What could be making such a sound? It sent chills down their spines and drew them out of their tents, fear etched on their faces. They stood in a tight circle, their flashlights cutting through the darkness but revealing nothing. The growl came again, louder this time, and closer. They could feel the vibrations in the ground beneath their feet. Panic set in, and they debated whether to stay put or make a run for it. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees looming like silent sentinels. They knew they had to make a decision, and fast, before whatever was out there found them first. Section 9. The Disappearance. They listened intently, their hearts pounding in their chests, but the sound didn't return. Just as they were about to dismiss it as their imaginations, a blood-curdling scream pierced the night. It was Chris, his voice filled with terror. They rushed towards the source of the scream, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, and found Chris's tent empty, ripped open from the inside. Chris was gone, vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the chilling echo of his scream. Section 10. Unanswered Questions. Emily and Ben searched frantically throughout the night, their calls for Chris swallowed by the dense woods. But he was gone. When morning came, they stumbled out of the woods, shaken and bewildered, their friend's disappearance a haunting mystery. The police investigated, but found no clues, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. Chris had simply vanished, swallowed by the darkness, leaving behind more questions than answers. Section 11. A haunting reminder. These two stories, as chilling as they are, serve as a stark reminder. The world is full of mysteries, and some things remain unexplained. So the next time you find yourself alone in the dark, remember Sarah and Chris and listen closely to the sounds of the night. You never know what lurks just beyond the shadows. The darkness is always listening,